Hey guys, today I'm going to show you how to fix a puncture on a pure air electric scooter. Now you may have heard, some electric scooters are quite difficult to change the inner tubes, but if you follow our tips and tricks and you have the right tools, you should find it easy. Now we're going to use a pure air electric scooter here, but if you want to see another brand, let us know in the comments down below and we'll see what we can do. So the tools you'll need are 2 T30 security tools, a 3mm Allen key, some tyre levers, a pump, a hammer or a mallet, a punch, and your spare tube. We're going to start with the front wheel, and it's a great idea if you can find some sort of wooden block so you can lift the front wheel off the table. That'll make it much easier to get access. Firstly, we're going to remove the brake adjuster bolt from the bottom of the brake cable. Next, we're going to need our 3mm Allen key, so grab that tool. And we're going to remove the drum brake retention pin from the side of the fork. Once you've removed that 3mm bolt, be careful because there's a small washer behind. My top tip is to use a tray like my magnetic one. Then we're going to need our 2 T30 bits to loosen the front axle nuts. I'm going to place one on each side because the axle will spin otherwise. Now these can be quite tight, so make sure your tools are in nice and straight and you've got enough leverage to get them undone. These bolts are quite long, so just persist. Now that one of the axle bolts is out, we can push the axle clear. So push from one side and pull from the other. If it gets a bit stuck, we have our hammer and punch, and we can just give it a quick tap to knock it the rest of the way out. Just going to place the punch in the end and give it a few gentle taps. We can now pull the axle free, but be careful, there's a washer on each side which we need to catch and pop in our tray so we don't lose them. Lastly, we're going to disconnect the brake. So pull down on your brake lever to release the spring, and careful not to lose the small adjuster bolt. From there we can remove our wheel. So most likely if you're doing this, you've already got a puncture, but for me, I'm going to have to let the air out. Just using something thin to press on the valve core. You see a little bit of the puncture prevention fluid has come out, but that's not a problem, there's plenty inside. Next we're going to work on taking the tyre off of the rim, so you'll need your tyre levers for this. The key to making this really easy is to squeeze the tyre and push it down inside the valley, inside the rim. Working opposite the valve, I'm going to squeeze and push that inside the valley, and you can see straight away I have a load of slack appeared at the bottom. That's going to help me take the tyre off, and if it starts to get tight, we can always revert to using a tyre lever to help us. That's one side completely free. So you can see here the valley that I'm using to push the tyre into, that's what gives us a slack. Same again on the other side. We're going to push the tyre into this valley, which should give us enough slack on the other side to pull the wheel free. Making sure to push the valve through the hole without damaging it. We're now free to pull the inner tube from the tyre. You can run your finger around the inside of the tyre, but be careful because whatever gave you a puncture might cut your finger as well. This one seems absolutely fine, so we'll reuse that one and we'll replace the inner tube. Taking our new inner tube, we're going to need to inflate it partially so that it holds its shape. Connect your pump, and we're just looking for enough pressure that the tube holds its circular shape. So something like that. It's nice and soft still. Unlike a bike, most scooter inner tubes have an offset valve, so the valve sits to one side. We need to make sure to align that to the correct side of the wheel. Some tyres are multi-directional, like this one on the Pure Air, but if you do have directional tyres, make sure they align with that valve as well. Check once again that your valve aligns to the correct side of the wheel and place it through the hole. Now the valve's in place, we can start fitting the tyre around the rim. You should be able to start this with your hands by simply pushing. I'm using my fingers on the inside to help the tyre go into the bead. Careful not to catch your inner tube as you're doing this, as you could cause a puncture. Moving on to the other side, we're going to need to make some slack. So using the same technique as we did before, press the tyre into the valley of the rim. So now we have some slack, we can start pressing the tyre in with our thumbs. Ideally, you'll make enough slack that you can push this on with your thumbs. If absolutely necessary, you can use a tyre lever to pop the last bit on, but I wouldn't recommend it if you can help it. Now that it's on, it's a good idea to check around the rim to make sure this small line on the tyre, which sits closest to the rim, is even. Just giving a little squeeze to make sure that's sitting in the right place. We can now re-inflate the tyre. If you find the tyre isn't sitting straight on the rim, you can add a little bit of soapy water between the tyre and the rim, and that'll help it pop into place. Tyre pressures can vary. The Pure Air is 36 psi, but others can be as high as 50, so make sure you get that correct, and you can reinstall your valve cap. Now it's time for reassembly, so I'm going to clear away these puncture things and bring back all the spare parts. Reinsert the drum brake into the wheel. And now reinsert the small barrel into the brake. Once you've done that, you can pop the wheel back inside the forks, and you will need the spring to put onto the brake cable. Put the brake cable into the brake house and slide the spring over the threaded section. This bit can be quite tricky, but we're aiming to get the threaded section into the brake barrel. So pull down on the lever and align that. Next we're going to reinsert the axle. So you'll need the axle itself and the larger of the two axle washers. Place the washer inside the fork between the wheel and the fork itself, and then slide the axle through the hole. You now need to lift the wheel into place so that the axle can slide through the wheel as well. You may need to tap this in. Now we need to fit the small axle washer. It goes between the fork and the brake. Now this can be a little bit fiddly, so persevere. Once it's in place, you should be able to push the axle all the way in. You'll see the axle comes to the end of the fork. Next we're going to need to fit the brake retention bolt and its washer. Rotate the brake until the hole lines up with the thread. We're going to hold the washer in place and refit the bolt. You can tighten this one up. This is only a small bolt, so it doesn't need to be really tight. Next we're going to refit the axle bolt, so we'll need our T30s again. I'm going to hold one side still while I insert the other. Once again, these are long bolts, so it can take a little while. We recommend tightening this to 25 Newton meters. Finally, we have the brake adjuster screw. Pull the brake lever arm up and thread this on. You'll notice the spanner section is at the bottom here. Tighten this until you're happy with the feel of your brake. If it starts to feel tight, can take some pressure off by moving the arm. So that's how to fix the puncture on the front wheel, and now we're going to move on to the back. As you can see, I've flipped the scooter, so at the back now, and I've folded the scooter down so it's not going to topple over when I work on the rear wheel. Take your T30, and you can loosen the rear wheel nuts. We don't need to use two on this one. Loosen the other side. Unlike the front wheel, you don't need to take these all the way out, as there's a few washers which will be kept on the axle. Once the bolts are loose, you can just disconnect the little hook washers and the wheel will slide out the back of the dropouts. Be careful here because the motor cable is still attached. And we can lift the scooter slightly to lay the wheel down. So the process from there is exactly the same as you do on the front wheel. We're going to release the air from the tyre, squeeze the tyre into the valley in the wheel and push it around to get our slack. The only extra difference is that we're connected by a motor cable, so you must be careful not to pull or yank on that. So hopefully this video has been of some help to you. If you have any questions, pop them in the comments down below and I'll try and get back to you. And as always, like and subscribe.